All right. Welcome, Oneness Fish.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, the Krav Stuff Podcast, episode number 5, everybody. So excited to have Oneness. He is a great friend, a great mentor. We just got done doing an amazing seminar at here at Krav Maga Spokane, your ranges seminar, which I think went over really well. We filled it up.
Yeah.
And even I learned new stuff. I love that every time when I get to learn something from you. So well, awesome. And so let's get started off. Let's talk, give us a little background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I started my martial arts career in Taekwondo in 1990 and went through that, competed for a number of years and tested all the way through to 3rd degree. And then during that time, Kirsten, my wife, opened a Taekwondo school herself in her hometown. I was competing and getting ready for a U.S. Open. I got injured pretty significant, and so that just kind of derailed the Taekwondo career at the time. And then we had a couple of incidences and different things. She found Krav Maga and signed us up. And so we went down to the National Training Center, and we were one of the first licensees in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, in the Northwest. And I fell in love with it. First 5-10 minutes of it, and that was it. And so we started pursuing that. So we did that in 1999 is when we started the Krav Maga career. So for 26 years, 27 years, we've been doing Krav. And I just kind of eliminated that. I also had the luxury of meeting Bas and started training with Bas. And then we opened Bas Rutten Systems and did that for about 9 years, 11 years. And so it's just kind of progressed from there. So that's kind of the martial arts journey.
Background. So you started TaeKwonDo. Is that how you met Kirsten?
Yeah, so we met kind of the way the school functioned before, and it was a big school. It had 1,200 students in there, and Kirsten taught, I think, 36 classes a week there, and she was kind of the mentor apprenticeship program to be the lead instructor, and was that for a number of years. And so their kind of premise was that when they had the free trial lessons, the girls would do the free trial lessons for the guys that came in, and then vice versa for the guys would do the girls. And it was a great marketing scheme or premise from there, but it worked out well. And that's when I met Kirsten and stuff. And so we were always friends for a number of years, and then we just started dating, and that was it. And
you guys been together how long?
32 years.
Holy cow.
So the whole
Congratulations on
so
that.
It's been good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I can't wait to have her on. She's been, you guys are just the greatest.
Yeah, she's a
tag team duo for sure. So you trained a lot in Taekwondo. You got injured. You were going to do USA?
Yeah, U.S. Open. That was kind of the big tournament. The school that we had, that we trained at, we had a lot of, Kirsten was an Olympic level competitor, and then we had a lot of friends that were Olympic level competitors. And they did U.S. Opens and stuff. And then when she established her school, we wanted to also kind of have those same credentials. And so if you won the U.S. Open or were a competitor, it just kind of established your Taekwondo school amongst the others and stuff. And so that's what I was training for, as well as Kirsten and others in the school. But I had an injury, and that took me out and stuff like that. And I wasn't even sure after I got injured and she found Krav, if I was going to be able to do that. But we went down there with the premise that we're going to get through it. And then I knew at that point in time I was going to get my black belt in Krav, and that was the only path that I wanted.
So you did the training, you guys met, and she started the school, and then she found Krav.
She did, yeah. We had a couple of incidences in just real altercations. And we realized, Taekwondo was good. We had a good foundation, and it was very self-defense orientated, and not just the competition style. But there were obviously some things that we couldn't kind of deal with. We needed the open space and all that stuff to kind of maneuver and do some of those things. And Krav was just ultimately ended up being the answer for that. We also did some things with our local police department, and in order to kind of do that, we were starting to dabble, Kirsten more so, to be reserve police officers. And then when she found Krav, she said, look, if I'm going to kind of pursue this and go become a police officer or anything like that, I want something that's just really self-defense orientated. And so she found Krav and was looking for that answer. And I was very hesitant initially. I'm like, I have Taekwondo and I have wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't need anything else. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And so I was very resistant initially. But once we were down there, that was it. I knew that this was the program that I really wanted when I started my martial arts career. So it was good. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So, training in Taekwondo, what was that like going all the way through first to third degree black belt?
Well, it was big, and we had a phenomenal Taekwondo instructor, Grandmaster Lee. He had a really good program, knew how to build instructors, so he had instructor programs and doing all those things. And I never wanted to be an instructor initially. I just wanted to train, I wanted to compete, I wanted to kind of go through that journey. But as you moved up through the ranks, that's the process that it just naturally flowed that way, which is the same for a lot of martial arts schools. But then I started doing the instructor programs that he had, and I got a little bit more comfortable. I was never somebody to be in front of the classroom and lead a class.
Really?
I would rather much be a wallflower. And then I still remember my first belt test that I got to conduct and run. And Kirsten and Mashley were in the back, and they're like, I think he's going to pass out. And that was before the class. And I probably was. So they were making bets. Everybody else was laughing. But I made it through, and it kind of the bug bit. And then that was it. And then when I found Krav, well, I didn't find it, but when Kirsten found Krav, and I went down there, it just really kind of established that, hey, I could do this on a more full-time basis. And so when we came back, I stopped teaching Taekwondo entirely. And I only concentrated on Krav. And we took about probably, I'd say a good 2 months before we even started teaching the classes. And then I still relied quite a bit on Kirsten because she could teach anything at any time. And she had that ability. And finally, she's just like, I'm no longer going to be in class and around, so you just learn to teach and stuff. And so I just jumped all into the deep end of the pool, and that was it. And then through Krav, that's where I met Bas. And then Bas was just that other missing link that I needed for the teaching. And he's really good about the why of things and how to kind of present things a little bit different. And it just all clicked. And then from there, it morphed into my current job.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. So with the Krav Maga training, were you still 7 days, or were you in the 9-day groups?
I was in the 9-day group.
Wow, you were.
So we were being in that first one. There were 34 of us, 36 of us in that initial group. The requirement was everybody had to be first through 5th degree. They had to have a black belt
in some other style.
In some other style. And then they told us right from the get-go that, hey, about 60% of this class is not going to pass. So
was that true? Hold on.
There was quite a few of us that didn't pass in that group. But there was also a core group. Like they picked the people that knew that were going to be able to be a part of that initial classes. And it kind of grew from there. But there were some people that didn't pass, and that was a crush to their egos.
Especially having a black belt and then getting shut down.
Yeah.
I mean, saying you're not good enough for our system.
Yeah.
Because there is a level of pride that comes with any black belt in any style. In my opinion, as we both have our black belts.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So they really just kind of emphasized that they were looking for a particular group to be able to build that next group of students as well as instructors. And so it definitely, you could just feel it was just different.
I definitely feel that it was some of the best training. It really was. That was one thing I've talked about, especially on this podcast, is how well they did at developing instructors. And you don't see it maybe until you're further on down the road,
right?
But that was a great part of it. But for you to be involved in the original, some of the OG part of it, all the way to black belt. So what was your phase training like was it all 9 for all of them until you got into expert series, or was even black belt more days than what I experienced?
Yeah, so the first 3 phases, the first 2 phases, let me take that back, were 9 days. And then after that, they made a change to the program and they went to 7 days. The 7 days was still just as intense as the 9 days. But we had the luxury of during phase A, it was the core group that had been training with Darren from the get-go, as well as people that had trained with Amy. So Darren taught a lot of the classes. Marnie, she was there. She was teaching a lot of the classes. Michael Margolin. So I think John Whitman, we met everybody, kind of the core group of original instructors and those that were running the National Training Center within those 9 days. And we had probably 2 days with each person. And then in phase B, I think it was all Darren. Darren really just made sure that all of us that were coming back, that he really made the time and stuff. And I had the opportunity to kind of be his, when he was demoing things, he kept calling me up. Yeah, we were doing a lot of bear hug defenses and hair pull different things. And so again, with that, my hair and all that stuff, so he like grabbing a hold of that. And so that it was just, that's where I started learning, I think, even more, because not only did I get the application of how to do things, but I got to feel it, like how he moved and how he presented it. And so it just always kind of continued on from there, because when I started training with Bas, I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to actually feel what they were presenting. So
that's awesome that you got to train with the people that I've had the luxury of training with. A couple of those people in my years of training, and it's different. It's different. Not that any of the other instructors weren't great, but it was just, you knew you were training with a different person, a special person, and just absorbed that. And so it made those days, even though you were beat to shit and tired as hell, you were like, cool, ready to go, ready to go. And it was so few, especially as time went by, you realize like, oh man, you're not going to get those chances to get with, the Pascals and the Levines. And it was really something else. And there's folks that I never got to train with. Marnie, of course, because she passed. But Sadea, I never got to train with him. So it's all so awesome to hear, because I know what I went through, but you hear the rumors of what it was like in the first ones. And so that's where it's an opportunity to get to share that a little bit with folks like myself, because there's others out there that went through what I went through, but didn't do the 9 days. And so it's interesting. You had to have a black belt. They told you right out of the gate that you were a high percentage were going to fail and wash out. And but then the training just proved to itself how invaluable and effective it was.
Well, that's it. And I remember the first day we did so much striking, and I was not a striker. And it just like, is this never going to end? I was like looking at Kirsten going, what did you sign me up for? And I don't think I can make it through this. I've never done that much punching. But finally, about day 3, we started getting into kicking. And then it was like, okay, this is easy, and I can do this, and that part's there. But I still remember it, and I woke up the next morning and I could barely move, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through it. And then after the warm-up, you forgot about being sore, and then
it's the craziest thing that we go through as a human with that, as far as like, you're just like, oh my God, you're so sore. And then it gets loosened up, and you're just like, oh, we're almost done with the day, and then you got another one on the tail end of it. I've heard, you shared with me a little bit about your black belt test. I know you had a point to prove on that, and so I definitely want to talk about Bas here in a second. But with that black belt test, what was the hardest mental? I know the physical component, it's hard. You were injured just like I was injured. But what was that mental aspect? Do you feel that the black belts that you took prior in Taekwondo helped you, or was this on a different level?
It was a different level. The black belt test for Taekwondo, again, nothing to discredit it, but because I had done it for so much, and I knew what was coming and what the expectation was, I could do that even if I didn't train. Like, I could pull that stuff off, and I just knew that I had to do the forms and all of that stuff, and anything that instructor threw out, I had already done it. With Krav, because it's very selective on who they had the black belt test. And it was a 3 days that they really wanted to kind of set that up. But you had to complete the expert series. But it was an unknown. And then you always know that, look, Phase A test was tough. Phase B was harder. Phase C was even more. And it's like, it was an unknown. The expert series, although they kind of had tests, they were more workshops to build up towards the black belt. And it didn't have the same structure, but there was an unknown. And then you knew that you were going to do one-on-one sparring. You were going to do 2-on-1. You might do 3-on-1.
Round Friday.
All of the stuff. And so, and a lot of times what happened is that they would bring in sometimes other instructors from other schools or professional fighters and work towards that. In our black belt tests, they didn't bring any professional fighters in, which I was a little surprised because a group of us were all Bas Rutten instructors. But I went down there to kind of prove a point about Bas Rutten.
Did you prove the points?
I did. And so a lot of times I told the people that I had trained with over the years and all that, hey, if you step out on the mat, there's a good chance that I was going to knock you out. And because I went there. Harry Shaw, unfortunately, he took the brunt of that.
Spleen, right?
Stuff. I hit him in the spleen. Yeah. What happened with Harry, being a Bas Rutten instructor, he started turning away when I was hitting those shots. And I told him, I said, if you turn away again, I'm gonna drop you.
As in turning away from the power.
The power in the punch, yeah. So we rather have people turn into it and try to block it.
Yeah.
And so what happened was he turned away. And I was already frustrated. I had injured my hamstring again, so I couldn't kick. And those guys were being generous as far as that they weren't kicking my legs. So it was more just upper body stuff. And so I was more frustrated on that. But then when I seen that he was turning away, the switch just flipped the rest of the way. And I hit him as hard as I could. And to his credit, he doesn't remember the last 15 minutes or half hour of the test. He stayed in there. He made it through.
Oh, he didn't go to the hospital.
And then he went to the hospital afterwards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he went afterwards. So he did another 15 minutes to half an hour. All on his own.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Now I made, I had a little karma coming back on that. I made it was on Facebook, I believe, and we were commenting, I believe it was history of that. And I made a comment about him having to go to the hospital because of you. And then in my black belt test, Harry took me to the hospital. So it all came full circle, right?
Full circle.
It's all full circle. Now I have to ask, there was a rumor that you threatened to throw, it was a small room at the Worldwide West location, West LA. That small front room, that you threatened to throw someone out that window.
Yeah. So we had another person that was in the test from one of the other schools, and he intentionally just kind of tried to do like a shovel kick towards everybody's knees. And so myself initially, I told him, hey, we're not doing those type of kicks. We just didn't want to end it. I had to work the next, that week.
Yeah, most everybody does that work, right?
And then Heath Jones was also there taking the test with us. And so Heath also basically said, and then that person injured another person that was going through the test.
With that shovel kick?
Not with the shovel kick. We were actually doing the edge weapon defenses. Darren came in, and so we switched from the training knives to real knives. And then one of the guys got cut, so it ended his test, and he took like 50 stitches.
It almost ended his career, too.
It almost ended his career. Yeah, he's a firefighter, captain for one of the local fire departments there. Really good training partner and all that stuff. So we didn't realize it might have been done on purpose. So I think if we would have known, the test would have been even different. But
did he get his in the end?
Yeah, we did. Between Heath and I, we tuned him up. Harry, I think all of us did. We just didn't do it as bad as we would have if we would have known the other thing.
But I think that was maybe what changed to where there was no more live-edged weapons.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah, and it was great. It definitely changes that element.
Yeah.
I was glad to have that experience with Darren and having him kind of work through that. But there was a gut check moment when the real knives came out and still trying to make those edge weapon defenses. You think that you're
wild.
prepared, and it
No.
just completely different.
It does. Jared brought him out on his brand new Dollar mats at his location, and it was the internal dialogue that you had with yourself was like, holy shit! You had to be spot on. You had to do it right, because there was that unknown variable that was really live and potential, and that was a unique experience. But to have it in a test, that wasn't even a test. That was just a training day for me.
And what happens is the confidence level, because now when it's a wooden knife or a training knife, you're like, oh, this is,
we're good to go.
This is nothing. And it's the same thing. I say it the same, like when I spar people, I can go for a long time without sparring people, but because I had the luxury of sparring Bas and Benji Raddick and some of these other guys over the years, now, not to pick on anybody else, but I can see things so much more different because of that level of experience that you just don't get that luxury all the time.
It changes the game.
It does. It changes that game.
And you were the most feared sparring partner that I've sparred with, but you were also the best. Because that feedback of like, we go hard and then you go soft, right? And it was that mutual respect, and that's what makes a great training partner. I don't think a lot of people realize that. It's just something that I think people take, and I've used that example, like I was scared to death, ready to step on the mats with you, but then after we got into it, I knew you could end it at any point in time. But the exchanges were done in a way to where I was like, oh, okay, where he's not going to go all out. He's going to meet me where I'm at. He's going to give me a little, but then we're going to go back down and communicate well.
And that's the way it was with Bas. Every single time. I mean, he really ultimately sees things so far ahead of anybody else, and he could literally knock you out at any time. It just, his game is so much different than anybody else. And so when he spars with you, he's only going to go with what you're going to go, but he's going to work on specific things, and he'll tell you that that's what he's going to work on. And then everything's just set up to kind of work on those things. And if he gets it, then he's going to move on and he'll let you know that he's working on something else. But the whole point is to build that confidence for you that, hey, I can do this and go. And then when I had the opportunity to train with Hector Pena, who's another, 13-time world champion, phenomenal fighter, and a huge pedigree, I learned a ton from him in a short amount of time. And he was another one that could easily, he got world champion.
Was it Hector that dropped you out with the liver shot?
Yeah, he was the first one that really ever did that. And I was not smart enough to stay down, so I got right back up and went after him again. I tried to hit him with an axe kick immediately afterwards, pull something off from the Taekwondo world, and he paid me back for that. And then I got up a third time, just not smart enough to stay down. And the hand was here, so right away he did it. Hit right to the head. So the hand went up, and then he hit it again. Yeah, and that was it. And then the third time I was smart enough to stay down. So,
well, let's go into Bas. How were you introduced to Bas? How did you get involved in Bas Rutten systems and the amazing program that you guys developed with her?
Well, so during phase A, with 9 days. Lot of striking, ton of striking, and that's really the foundation initially in Krav, right? Striking, learning how to punch correctly, working through hammer fist and all that stuff. And these were things that I never really did. When it got to the kicking and some of the other movement, that part was not a problem. But the striking was, and I wasn't real good. Kirsten wasn't real good at this.
At the striking with the hands, upper body
just
stuff.
The upper body stuff. And so we were picking things up, but they said, look, we're passing you both for phase A, but you need to improve your striking. If you don't make those improvements, phase B, phase C, probably not going to pass you, right? So we need to see these improvements. And they said, hey, we have somebody that maybe you should meet. He's got these tapes that are really good, and they'll help with your striking, because we didn't have any resources. If I lived in LA, I could have gone to the National Training Center and been there every day to train and to make those improvements. Well, like yourself, we're going back to our location, and there's no training partners, right? We have to build our training partners. We have to build those things. So they said these tapes may help, and we'll have the person come down. And so they invited Bas to the National Training Center. He taught there on a regular basis, but he's not there during the phase training. Just him and I clicked right from the get-go. Just spoke to him for about 5 minutes. I got his tapes.
And they were literally cassette tapes back then.
Cassette tapes, yeah. And so we did that. We came back. And I was telling 2 of my students that I met this gentleman down there, and here's these tapes. We're going to start incorporating them into our training. And they were like, wait, you met Bas Rutten? And I'm like, yeah, who's this guy? I don't really know.
Oh, you didn't know?
I didn't know.
Pedigree.
Never seen his fights, never knew anything.
Wow.
And they're like, dude, this is the guy. So they gave me some CDs that had his fights from Japan. And
The Pancrase days.
yeah, the Pancrase days. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was this guy.
That's awesome.
And so I just started listening to the tapes and working through those and going through. And then Phase B was Sam Sade was teaching a lot of the phase training at that time. He was also training with Bas at Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu and some other places. And they were good friends. So he was like, hey, do you want to train with Bas and get a little bit more instruction? And I was like, yeah. So we went and did a little bit of stuff with Bas. And so we started building that relationship. And again, I had my students that were huge fans of his. And then when he went into the UFC and started doing that, that just kind of was the morph. And then he started to build Bas Rutten systems. And I was at the second instructor training.
Wow.
And after I did Phase C, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to go through the expert series. It was just my back injury was kind of bothering me, and I wasn't quite sure. But when I reached out to Bas and talked to him, and I said, hey, I have this thing. I'm not sure if I can do your system, but I would like to go try it. And he's like, yeah, come on out. So I flew out to St. Louis. That was a 7-day, I think, as well. Wow. And it was great. But he had no instructor manual. He just had, here's how to do an armbar, and it just would have one word on it and then a couple little bullet points. So what I did is I took that and I built a manual. I sent it to him and said, hey, if you can use this, great, but this is just what I needed. And so we started building that relationship. And then he said, hey, why don't you start coming out to these other instructor courses and kind of assist me, take the notes, because I'll say things and I need to get that down and build the manual. So that's kind of how we started building that relationship. So eventually I started getting everything all the way through to his second degree black belt. We were trying to pre-plan those things. And I started teaching all the instructor courses with them and traveling out to different places. And so we just kind of built that relationships, and then eventually Kirsten started coming into Bas Rutten systems as well. And so we opened that up and restructured the business. And so the 3 of us were the business owners, and kind of built the Fight Club and everything else.
Yeah,
and just kind of morphed from there.
Fortunate enough to get a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of people are not aware of Bas Rutten systems. Some people are aware of who he is, but not that he had a system that really complements Krav Maga beautifully.
Completely.
And you even spoke this weekend about the fact that Krav Maga used to have a karate L stance, and that Bas helped convince him that the squared up stance was more of a...
Yeah, so they started out, because Darren's background was originally karate. His mom was a karate instructor and had her school, and he was down there. And so it kind of had that structure. And Amy also had a karate background. And then when they got to some of the weapon defenses, they would kind of tweak the defense a little bit. So Bas was just like, hey, I have this stance and I have it all the way through. And again, as he was teaching at the National Training Center, him and Darren are talking, and I think that just the natural progression was already there. And so they just kind of went to the more square stance for everything.
Wow.
And then it just kind of progressed from there. So Bas was always a big part of the National Training Center. He fell in love with Krav Maga and the simplicity of the system, and he always tried to stay to that with his system. And so there's just the structure of how he does things is just keep it very simple. And my job was really to kind of listen to what he was teaching and then modify it and make it to
Following
manual.
similar principles.
Yes, and just kind of adhere to those things, so that way we could build it and transfer that knowledge over to the students.
Yeah.
So
I don't think a lot of people that have been involved with Krav Maga and Krav Maga Worldwide in particular realize how Bas had the connection. I mean, there's a reason he wrote the foreword in the very popular book of the Krav Maga, in the manual books, so to speak. I forget exactly how I should describe that. But yeah, his foreword is in there. And so I didn't really understand that until I got involved with you guys in Bas Rutten Systems. And it was such a great experience to meet Bas, but let alone to train with him.
Yeah.
And that was just the game changer for us in Krav Maga Spokane. And so, it's nice to know the history, and I'm excited to share it with others too.
Yeah, and we were lucky, right when we were starting Krav and doing all that stuff, Amir started coming in. I remember the first time he came into the National Training Center.
And it's Amir Perez, right?
Amir Perez and stuff. And so the three of them really, Darren, Bas, and Amir, built this friendship, which was fantastic because it allowed the rest of us to kind of learn from the three of them. And so they started this Complete Combat series. And that series was kind of like an introduction to a hybrid. Not changing Krav Maga, staying to the core principles, but they would give just pure self-defense. And then Amir would talk about physical conditioning and stuff that he did at the IDF. And then Bas would add in a little bit more of the ground and what he did. And they morphed all three of those things into this seminar series.
Awesome.
And they would travel around the United States, and they were huge. Hundreds and hundreds of people.
Really? And what years was that happening?
Oh, I want to say 2005, 2007.
Wow.
Around those times. I don't remember the exact date, but I went to several of them. I made a point to go there because when they were teaching and talking about this hybrid, I could see the blend. And I had already started doing some things with Bas, and I was kind of blending that. So I took it on even more so. And that's where I took a break from Krav Maga and just went all in on Bas Rutten Systems.
And that's where you got all the training and all the fun stories.
And so and everything just became about Bas and was a little less on Krav. But I always looked through the lens of Bas's stuff through Krav Maga. And so it just brought me back to that. And then once I really learned Bas's system and took my black belt test with him, I came back to Krav. And then from there, I moved into the Force Training Division section. And then the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, because you're in law enforcement with the Department of Corrections, right?
Yeah. So that's my day job, is that I oversee the Correctional Academy for the correctional officers. We run a really good program, and they get Krav Maga is the basis, but then they get some influences from Bas Rutten Systems as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Krav Maga is illegal to have like books, manuals, anything like that, but the inmates, just because they know that you guys know that?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And we had a couple times when, people would get released and then they would come and contact me and say, hey, could I come and train with you? That's not happening.
And then, statistically, ever since you became a part of that program and convinced them to switch to Krav Maga, the incident rate has plummeted at that institution that you're involved with. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did. We took our use of force, so our injuries to officers also decreased significantly. That was kind of the biggest thing that we really worked on, was to, again, just make better officers, physically conditioned, being able to deal with those situations. And if they got into altercations, we wanted to make sure that they were able to resolve those as quickly as possible. And we also built our instructors, the same as Krav Maga Worldwide does in their force training. And so everybody kind of went through, and then it morphed into other stuff. The warm-up that we use, it's the same warm-up. So our tactical team uses that. Our cell extraction team guys use it. So it's throughout the whole system. And then everybody knows the 1 through 4 combinations.
That's awesome.
And so Kirsten built a specific health and fitness program for our academy based off of the Bas Rutten Systems. And it just more from there. So everybody in our department knows the 1 through 4 combinations.
Yeah. Well, it's so simplistic and it's so easy to plug and play.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the biggest difference between the Taekwondo, or let's say Taekwondo today to Taekwondo when you did it? I forgot to ask that before.
Yeah, so the traditional martial arts has shifted, you know, and so it's the competition is it's faster, right? And they're trying to make the game a little bit more exciting, but they took away from some of that, and the kicks are different. They don't have, they're much faster, so they don't have the power. And so when we watch some of the Taekwondo events now, they're a lot more, I would say, flashier. And it's kind of like jiu-jitsu. There's two kind of realms with jiu-jitsu. There's the sport orientated, and then there's the self-defense. And now they're kind of morphing back towards the self-defense because it got so much competition. People are getting takedown points for a quick takedown or doing certain things, and it's just kind of has moved more towards the sport. Boss's system, he's really just tried to incorporate those things in, and so the same with Krav, is that it's just really about self-defense and trying to deal with those situations as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and that's where I think I wanted that ask that question to lead into how do you see the world of martial arts today and Krav? Where is its place at? Because Krav, and in my experience, is the most misunderstood, most shit talked about.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because of pure ignorance,
yeah.
right? Because it is reality-based self-defense. So I think with your background and expertise, like hearing it from, hey, I've done competitions, I've competed in this, I've trained with high-level MMA fighters. Where does Krav Maga come out with all of that today? Where do you see it at?
I still see it as being one of the best self-defense programs, and especially for the correctional officers or law enforcement in general. There's other things that are out there, but sometimes they violate principles that we know that we don't want to violate, right? And I think that's the unique part with Krav Maga, is that it is a principle-based system. We're able to adapt to those situations that maybe we haven't trained. We can't train all of the situations that my officers are going to be in, but because they have those principles, they can fall back to something and know what to deal with and how to deal with it quickly. We want them to be problem solvers. And so I think sometimes systems go really focused on specific techniques that work for that one situation. And that's the part that's there. And then when they violate principles, some of the weapon retention or some of the things that they do, they only work against one weapon and they don't work across the board. And I think that's the unique part. I also think that how Krav builds people from a low level to a high level quickly, that's the part that sets it apart. And I know it gets a bad rap. Sometimes that may be the initial instructor, because they're learning as they're kind of building. But then you have some specific schools like Krav Maga Spokane, our school back in the day, Krav Maga Portland, and some of these that we get it in how the program is supposed to be built. And I think we stay true to those Krav Maga principles. Where sometimes people will add things in. Like I never added stuff into Bas Rutten systems to my Krav Maga class. If somebody asked it because they were training in both of the systems, I would say, this is going to violate the principles. And so I always stay true to the principles. And I think if we do that, then we don't get that morphing that disrupts the system.
Yeah, no, I think they've explained quite well. It's still, I think it's always going to be that way. I don't think it's ever going to become the jiu-jitsu, which I wouldn't want it to, or the taekwondo back in the day. It's kind of the black sheep of the family, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the training and the implementation of the training that you receive.
Right.
Can you adhere to that and keep it to what it was, or are you going to kind of water it down just so you can, sell some belts? And that's not something that Krav has really been part of, the belt wearing per se. We don't do it. We don't wear belts, and I never wore belts in any of the training. Did you guys wear belts?
We never wore belts, and not a bad thing. There's some schools that will do that, but we also, again, the students, I never really tried to push them to take the test. We gave them the knowledge. We would talk about the principles. If there was an edge weapon that I needed to show them, then it was showing them. If it was long gun, then we showed them, and we had the conversations. And again, it was more about just building those principles and making sure that they understood the why of things. I think sometimes people don't always teach to the why. You're really good about explaining the whys to the students, and that's what I think really progresses them. Because we can't cover every situation, you know.
No.
And the more that we can really keep to those principles, I think that's what Darren has always stressed, is how he was able to teach the principles. And it just, that always clicked for me.
Yeah, it's been one of the systems that you talk about growing fast. You know, I've talked about in the podcast, and we're in the middle of it, is, you know, I opened as a yellow belt.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do that today in the jiu-jitsu world.
Yeah.
But when there's no place to go and train except for traveling, what are you supposed to do? And
Yeah.
so it's unique unto itself with that you have this capability. But if you want to be, in my opinion, considered like legit, like your school was, and Portland and whatnot, you need to see it through.
Right.
And you need to adhere to the principles that were taught to you, and then work through the system, and it's going to work for you. And if you stop at any point in time, well, that's going to be the top of your school. It's not going to go any further, right? You can add a couple of weapon defenses in, but okay, you've got your yellow, your orange belt. That's this in Krav Maga world. Yellow and orange is a decent amount of material, but it's not the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's why initially they said everybody had to have be a black belt in another system. So you had those foundation skills. You've already been training for a number of years, right? So you're established. And then others that were coming in for the other instructor courses, they were training at their training center for a number of years before they went to an instructor course. So when you say I was a yellow belt, you had a number of years, right? And so some of those KMTUs that you attended and stuff like that. So you were building that repertoire or that toolbox for a while, and then went to the instructor course. So you had several years worth of knowledge before you went through that course. And then in that 7-day course, you're going to get a year and a half worth of training.
It is a
7 days.
ton of volume. It's so hard to convey to people, because we say, like, you know, we're doing 8 to 10 hours a day, you know, almost like, well, I had to walk uphill both ways in snow, but it was for real.
Yeah.
But you understood it because you had done the reps so many times. And that's why when I got involved with Bas in your guys' system, it was the same type of thing, just over and over and over. And I love the way that Bas had us teach with our back to the class. Not something we're going to do, but we're doing it for a purpose. Teach with our eyes closed. I mean, I remember those moments. I remember exactly what we're working on, the key lock on the side, and I had to teach it, you know, eyes closed, right? And so I have to tell everybody what to do, and that's such a phenomenal way to know the technique inside and out, and the what and why. And Bas was so good about that.
Yeah.
And it was, for me, such an eye-opening experience. And I got into it young, kind of like you did, right around phase B. We both got involved with it at the same stage of our Krav Maga training career. It made such a difference on the mats when it came to the sparring, because I used to be afraid of it. And then once I got the training, I was excited for it. And that was such a huge change for me. And so, so fortunate to be a part of it. Talking about black belts, what, in your opinion, what makes a black belt?
Well, looking at it from the Krav lens, right? It is that you're able to deal with those situations that may arise with no hesitation, right? So we talked a little bit about this, because you're going to have the students that are going to be testing for blue, brown, and black, which is awesome. And to your credit to have that group of students that are going to be doing those tests. But the level is that regardless of what weapon is there, there's no hesitation, right? So I have to assess things. I have to be able to, whether it's right-handed or left-handed, if it's off to the side, and what distance. So we have to kind of assess that as quickly as possible, tenths of seconds, rather than 15 seconds or 30 seconds. And I think that's what really makes that black belt, is being able to deal with those situations. Also, I have the awareness that I may not just have one attacker, I may have multiple attackers. And I may also have to keep not only myself safe, but I may have to keep somebody else safe, a family member, another person, all of those things. And I think that's what makes that black belt. They have the confidence to be able to deal with those situations, problem solve in the moment, but then also deal with a lot of other things. And because of all of that stuff coming in, can they successfully do that? And that's really what the test will do, is to build that fatigue in there and see where they're at.
So from the physical aspect, mentally, what makes a black belt? In any style per se, but we're talking Krav and Bas.
It's the ability to not give up. That if you get knocked down, the strive is to get right back up to your feet and go again. And like I said, I've always had that ability. I think I've been wrestling since I was 5 years old. Not at a collegiate level, but I probably should have. But I've wrestled with enough collegiate and international level.
Quest,
yeah,
right?
and some of those guys and stuff like that. But like when Hector hit me, I was not smart enough to stay down. My drive was to get back up on my feet and pay him back. I was never going to pay him back, but I thought maybe I would. You never know if you get a lucky kick in. And I wasn't against Hector. And so he made me pay again, and I was enough to get back up. And I think that it's that mentality. People have to know that when they want to give up, that's just the first step, and they have a lot more room to be able to keep going. More. And I think that's also what Worldwide is, in Krav in general, is always looking for, is those people that know that, hey, I have to get through this, I have to survive this, and that's my only option.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people misjudge Krav Maga, because we don't have, it's not a sports-based competition style,
right?
But it's reality-based self-defense.
Yeah.
And if you're confined by rules in a cage and there's none outside, if you've never trained for that, that's going to be a delay in your reaction time. That's going to be a delay in your response. And so that, for me, is what makes it so special, is the fact that it's coming from just a different mindset, the lens that you speak of.
Yeah.
And until you experience it, and not just taking one class or the trial week or whatever, but like putting in the work to learn what the system is all about, and you can see how it's going to complement you in your everyday walk of life, whether it's reading body language, avoiding something that you see coming up ahead, or just dealing with stress in the moment, right? Because that was the biggest thing that I learned, because I had no military, no law enforcement experience. The extent of my physical, being pushed to my limits was high school sports.
Right.
And Krav took me into areas that I had no idea that I was actually capable of doing, and it was an emotional experience too.
Completely.
And all those things build you. They really do. And that's for me where the black belt comes in. But hearing it from you, I have multiple black belts, Bas system, Krav, TaeKwonDo. It's a different mindset. You're not just going to, let me correct myself. You can just get a black belt for a certain price and certain styles. But in what you went through, and especially at the time of Taekwondo, that wasn't the case.
Oh, yeah. The emotional part, right? You have to be prepared for that. And I don't think a lot of people are. It is physically demanding. So you know that, and you can kind of prepare for that. But when you go through that black belt test, you're going to find out more about yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that you're not. And you will contemplate, like, I don't know if I made the right life choice about phase 3.
Well, if you don't have that question, you're not doing it right.
Yeah. And so that's where you start to kind of go. But when you're done with it, and I still remember at the end of my black belt test, tears hit. I mean, physically, a leg was injured. I probably had a level 2, level 3 hamstring tear at that time. But emotionally, I was drained. I was cramping. Everything was there. And it's just, but I survived and I made it through. And now, anything that happens, I'm okay. It's not near as bad as that day.
I can't explain to people enough. We try and push people to their limits in the test, but every single test, and you know this, every single phase or belt test, if you will, in Krav Maga, there is something special and horrible burned into your mind forever, and it will forever be there. Yeah. And it was such a huge thing for me. It came at a point in time where, it helped out a lot, and it's just been such a great ride. Yeah. And it's been awesome to have you a part of it. Yeah. So even though I didn't understand your name when I first met you.
I don't think anybody does.
Let me check here. Have you ever had to use your Krav Maga, wrestling, Taekwondo, Bas skills out in the real world?
Yeah, I have on several occasions.
Several occasions, all right? Top one.
But just probably the biggest one, Taekwondo, I was probably second, maybe third degree at the time. I was playing flag football, and anyways, one of the guys took off, and the other teams got mad and upset that he ended up scoring a touchdown. They grabbed him, started hitting him, and I'm running down the field, and I was known for I could jump over people. I had really good height, and so I jumped over, and I was probably the guy was probably about my height, 5'10" or so, and my cleats hit him. So I was probably about a good 7 feet in the air, and I hit him with my cleats right in the chest and just dropped him. And then I turned first to somebody else, and then finally that guy was free, and then somebody jumped on my back, and I threw him over, and I didn't want to hit him because I didn't know who he was and stuff, but the people that were the altercators initially, it was a melee. So that was my first experience of ever using martial arts outside of the training center, and from there, confidence happens. What I really try to do now, and what Krav is instilled, is the awareness, right? And so I teach this to my officers, is be aware, see these pre-incident indicators and things ahead of time. So a lot of times I'm able to avoid those situations, or I just see things and I go the opposite way. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that also Krav doesn't get enough credit for, is really building that awareness to pre-incident indicators, to see that there's an issue and try to avoid those issues ahead of time and stuff. So there's lots of little things to people, you just see that there's potential of altercations going to happen and stuff. So, and there's other little things over the years, lots of things.
With Bas, in the time that I was with him with the training, his stories were they're just amazing, right? He's like the best storyteller.
Really.
And even Kirsten was like, don't ask him questions because it's going to take away from the training. But give me your best Bas story.
So the best Bas story was really through, well, there's two of them, and I'll share those. But the first one was that at the end of it, I could then teach anything, and it no longer mattered. So we were at St. Louis. This was the second Bas Rutten instructor course. He decided to have a seminar on the last day. And he bringing in professional fighters to high-level jiu-jitsu people, all these people that were around the St. Louis area, Missouri area, coming into this seminar. And he says, look, I want to see how you guys teach in a seminar setting. I'm going to give you a technique. You need to practice it and then teach it. And we're like, okay. So we get there, and I had inverted heel hook. I still remember the technique, and I have the photo. That's why I want to share this story. But right before I go out to teach it, he says, hey, all of these people paid to see me teach this. This is one of my techniques that I've made, that really understand and know. Don't fuck it up. And there's a photo with him watching and looking, and I have that. And I go to my training partner, Jonathan Posey, out of Arkansas, really nice guy. And I'm like, if I miss something, you gotta mention it to me, just whisper it.
You're doing the technique
on him. I'm doing the technique on him. Bas is in the back like this, and everybody's around. And there was 120 people there probably, I don't know. There was just packed house. And I was so nervous. It clicked, everything there, and after that, I didn't care who was there. Darren could be there, Amir could be there, John Pascal. I could teach whatever it was, and it
You
just
didn't
like
have
that.
You didn't have the butterflies.
I didn't have the butterflies anymore because of that, and I keep that photo. That's probably one of the best photos from all of the trainings and all of the things I've done. And it just, at that point, I had the confidence to know that, sometimes people go through like, do I really have the confidence to teach this? It's kind of the imposter scenario type thing, and can I do this? At that point, it was like, no, I can do this. And from then on, it's literally, that's the click for it. The other story with Bas is our testing. When we went through testing, it was difficult. You had to really know the curriculum. So what he would do is we'd teach it, you go home, you train on it for 6 months or so, and then you come back, and then you're gonna do the test. And with Bas, the way his style is that certain words, if you keep repeating them, they become an annoyance to him. And so I kept saying, I don't even remember what the word was, and I kept repeating it. And he stops me in the middle of the test. And he goes, if you say that word again, your test is done. And you're not passing. I don't want to hear you say that again. And I don't even, like I said, I don't remember what it was. But Alex Schonauer from the Ultimate Fighter Show was my training partner for that and doing the belt test with me. He wasn't testing, but he was our demo person. So immediately when I started again, I said the word. And I looked at Alex and I'm like, I'm not even going to look at him because I know he's pissed right now. That was just another one of those times. And I got through. And the way that Bas's testing is that once you did one technique, if you did it right, he gave you another technique. And then you taught that one. And you just kept going until he figured that you were done with the test. If you failed that first one, he didn't let you go on. He would ask you 1 or 2 questions to see if you knew the technique and you maybe just messed something up. If not, your test was done. That was it. So you flew out and one technique, you screwed it all up. You couldn't answer the questions, that test was done. So I never had those. I mean, I knew the material better than even Bas on some things. Because I studied it and broke it down.
Man, you guys broke it down the manual from the big DVDs of combat that he created. And then even in the manual, like we were looking at it yesterday, you have where it's at in the manual or in the big DVD of combat. So if you actually want to go watch it, you can go watch it.
Right to there.
Love that.
And so I would break down both of those. I watched the DVDs all the time. And then if I seen differences in the video or the book, I would call Bas. And so we would probably talk, 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes when he was in Japan, he was like, hey, I'm in Japan and I can't right now. And so and I would fly down to LA and hang out with him and his family and stuff. So it's there. It's there. And I still talk to him, not on a regular basis, but we still chit chat every once in a while and stuff. So we stay in contact.
Yeah. Still thankful that you guys created Bas Rutten Systems and I was able to get become a part of it and help change the school. Yeah. And I'm so thankful that I got to meet you. That was just a freak occurrence. You know, I talk about in the podcast that there happened to be an opportunity to come to Junction City and I happened to have someone there that I could go be with to stay and train with. And little did I know that, it would create this relationship that we're coming up on almost 2 decades.
Yeah, it's been crazy. And, I still remember that came to you and meeting you. Matt Roman was the one that came out and taught that one. Matt was a great...
He's such a great guy, great instructor. Yeah. I was in deep waters. I had only been doing Krav for just a few months. I was in deep waters. That's where I met Mike Satz. And but you guys were so welcoming, and that's what I loved about Krav is it was hard. They busted your ass, but like they were there for you if you wanted to stay with it, because I mean it did wash out some folks. There was you had those moments. What was I doing here? Why did I make this choice today?
Right. Oh yeah. No, a lot of those things, and I think that's the part that I think just sets Worldwide apart, as well as just to some of the organizations out there. And we really tried to establish with what they had as their instructor development with Bas Rutten Systems. And it really is a great system, probably one of the best striking systems, but then his ground and his methodology from there, And,
it's done so much for our school. Our ground is on a different level. I mean, I talked about to you that when I was in testing for Brown, my training partner at the time was just like, that's never going to happen again because it was just domination, just because of the training that I put in with you guys. And that for me, the striking, being able to strike at a great level, it changes everything. And to incorporate that in the school as early as we did, it's been 15 years since I've become a part of, had Bas Rutten Systems training. It's fantastic.
That's it. And we had, guys, even from my students that, they traveled and went and fought on different states and all that stuff, and people that went and did things with Robbie Lawler, and had peoples that went to New York and did stuff with Renzo Gracie to Marcelo Garcia, all these things. And they were like, where did you guys, where did you start from? And I went to a little school in Junction City, and we did Bas Rutten Systems. And it was like, in Renzo Gracie and Bas, a lot of those guys are super good friends, and I think that
A lot of those old school guys that brought the stuff to the States, created a lot of what's going on to this day.
And I think also, just Krav in general, we don't get enough credit with the ground that we teach, and people forget. And I'm going to mention Richard Bressler. He was an influence. He was one of Hicks and Gracie's first students in the U.S. He was one of those ones that taught at the National Training Center. He was a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He was my first introduction to the ground stuff. And so I remember going through face training and then stepping into one of his classes afterwards because I wanted to know more about the ground. Just being a wrestler, I was drawn to that. And the way he instructed and was able to teach things, I was hooked. The only bad part was that I didn't have a good jiu-jitsu school around me. And then I met Bas, and everything clicked there. I think if I never met Bas, I probably would have hung out with Richard on a more consistent basis and really learned what he was teaching. Those guys that are at the National Training Center, they were very lucky to have him and his pedigree. And he is one of the reasons why we have the UFC today, because he was one of those original persons that contributed to that and stuff. And people don't know that we had that. We had a really good black belt at the National Training Center. And so he's always been looking at what we're teaching and how we're doing it, and had a big influence into that program.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm fortunate that I got to train with some great people. I know the organization is not what it used to be, and a lot of those instructors are not where, and they're not involved with it anymore. But it was a good time, a great time. Still appreciate it. All right, last question. Prime Chuck Norris. Prime Bas Rutten. Who wins?
Ooh, man. Chuck Norris is kind of my guy for that spinning heel kick. And I've always tried to have my kick be the same as his, but I had to give it to Bas. He is just one of those innovators. He looks at things completely different than anybody else. He's a true martial artist, and he just wants and picks up those resources. But it would be really close. But I'd have to give the edge to Bas.
Give the edge to Bas.
All
right, man. Oneness Fish. Thank you for coming on.
You bet.
I appreciate it. Man.